Begin the Gemara on the bottom of Daf Chaf Hey Amud Beis. Tana Rabbanan, we learned na Braise ve'elu kroin she'ein misachin. The following are the halachas of the kriya when a person tears by the avelos that you're not allowed to sew back up. Hakireya al aviv al imay, one that is tearing for a father and a mother, val rabbi shalom de teire, a teacher that taught him teire, val nasi, a nasi that passed away, al av bezdin, or for an av bezdin, val shmuis harois, and for a bad news that has come. The Gemara will soon explain what kind of bad news we're talking about. Va'al birchus Hashem, or someone that does the opposite of blessing Hashem's name. Val sefer Torah shenisraf, or a sefer Torah that was burnt. Val ori Yehuda, or he sees the cities of Yehuda that are destroyed. Val Mikdash, Val Yerushalayim, he sees the base of Mikdash destroyed, or Yerushalayim destroyed. The Kaireya al Mikdash, when someone sees the base of Mikdash destroyed, so he does kriya for that. Umaysif, and then he doesn't have to tear kriya completely new for Yerushalayim, but he just adds al Yerushalayim. He adds when he sees Yerushalayim destroyed, which the Gemara will also explain. What does this mean that one sees the base of Mikdash first destroyed and then Yerushalayim? You bepashtus, you first see the city Yerushalayim and then the base of Mikdash. Then the Braisa says, okay, this is the Braisa. Gemara now brings the explanation of this Braisa. A father, a mother, or a teacher that taught one person Teire, that he has to tear kriya for them, and he's not allowed to sew it up again. Minolam, from where do we learn this? The Chsiv, it says in the pasuk, Ve'elisha ra, and Elisha saw Eliyahu Navi when he went up to Shemayim, V'hu mitzayik, and he screamed, Avi, Avi, Rechev, Yisrael, Parashav. My father, the chariot of Yidden and its horses. So what do we understand from all these expressions he said? Avi, Avi, Ze, Avi, V'imai. When he said the two expressions of Avi, Avi, this is like he's speaking about a father and a mother. Rechav Yisrael Parashav, the expression of Rechav Yisrael Parashav, Ze Rabbi Shalom de Teire. That expression he used because it was his Rebbe that taught him Teire. My mashma, how do we know that this expression means that it's his Rebbe that taught him Teire? Kedemetargem, like it says, Kedemetargem Rav Yosef, like Rav Yosef translated this pasuk, Rebbe, that this is my Rebbe, the Tavloin li Yisrael b'tzloisei, that it was beneficial, he was good for the Yidden with his davening, mirisichin u'paroshin, than the chariot and its horses. So this is what it says there regarding Elisha when Eliyahu Navi passed away, or when Eliyahu Navi actually went up to Shemayim. So how do we know that he tore kriya and that you can't sew it back? From where do we know that you don't sew it back? The pasuk there says, he held on to his garments, and he tore them into two pieces that were torn. It says that he tore his garments, so I don't know that this means that he tore it into two. This teaches me that he tears them, and it has to remain torn like this forever. Reish Lakish said to Rabbi Yechanan, Eliyahu chayu. Eliyahu never passed away. Eliyahu is still alive. So why is he tearing kriya b'chlal? He just went up to Shemayim living. Amalei, so Rabbi Yechanan answered, Kivin d'chsiv, because it says that after this he didn't see Eliyahu Navi again. Legabe didei kemeis dami. So for him, for Elisha, it's like he passed away, and therefore he tore kriya like when a person passes away. Going back to what it said in the Braise, Novi, Nasi, that is, Va'av Bezdin, the Shmuas Harois, Minola, for a Nasi or an Av Bezdin, or bad news, from where do you know that one tears kriya and it's not sewed up again? The Chsiv, the Pasuk says, Vayachazek, David, Bibigodov, Vayikarem, David the Melech held on to his garments and he tore them. V'gam Kol HaNoshim HaShe'ita, and the same, the other people that were with him did as well. Vayispadu, they eulogized, Vayifko, and they cried, Vayatsumo, and they fasted Ad Ha'arav until at night. So what was this for? Al Shaul, this was for Shaul. Val Yehonasan Benoi, and for Yehonasan, the son of Shaul that passed away. Val Am Hashem, Val Beis Yisrael, Ki Nofla B'chorev, and for the nation, the Yidden that fell to the sword. So Shaul is a Nasi. So he tore kriya for Shaul, so he was a Melech, he was a Nasi. So we see that you tear kriya for a Nasi. Yehonasan, which was his son, Av Bezdin, he was an Av Bezdin. Alam Hashem Val Beis Yisrael, Elu Shmuas Harois, this was the bad news that they heard about the Yidden that passed away. Amalei Rav, Bar Shavuot Rav Kahana, So Rav Bar Shva asked the question to Rav Kahana, in this pasuk, you don't see that you have to tear kriya for each one separately. Maybe it's only when you have all of these together happening, then one tears kriya. So you answered him, al hifsekinyan, because it says al yishal and al yahinis, and so it separates each one separately, that one has to tear kriya. Does one have to tear kriya when there's bad news? But it was said to Shmuel that Kotal Shver Malke, that Shver Malke, the king Shver, killed Treiser Alfi Yehudai, 12,000 Yidden, b'Mezigas Kesari, in the place called Mezigas Kesari. V'loi Kora, and he did not tear kriya for this bad news. So we see that you don't tear kriya for this. So the Gemara answers, what kind of bad news does one have to tear kriya for? Loi Omru elo b'roiv tzibur. You have to take kriya if one hears bad news that most of the congregation of Yidden were killed. And like the story that happened over there, then in the time of David HaMelech, that he tore kriya for this. Yeah, this was in the time of, the pasuk there by David HaMelech. So that the Gemara asks, going back to this point that it brought up over here, that Shver Malke killed 12,000 Yidden. Mi kotel Shver Malke Yehudai. Did Shver Malke kill 12,000 Yidden? We know that Shver Malke said to Shmuel, Teisili, I deserve a reward, Lekotli Yehudi Me'olam. I never killed a Yid forever. So you see, he didn't kill any Yidden. Answers the Gemara, Hassam, in that case when he killed 12,000 Yidden, Inu Garmil and Avshayu, they brought this upon themselves. What he meant to say to Shmuel is, I never killed a Yid for no reason. But over here, they rebelled against him. They brought it upon themselves. So Amar Abami said, why did he kill them? L'koil Yiseri, the Mezigas Kesari, because of the extra commotion that these Yidden made in the city of Kesari. They were rebelling against the king with a tremendous commotion. Paka Shura de Lutkiya. And therefore, the walls of Lutkiya were broken open, and he came and he killed them. Going back to the Braise, it said, Al Bikras Hashem, when one hears Hashem's name, being the opposite of a blessing, so then one has to take kriya as well. It says in the pasuk, Vayovei El Yokim ben Chilkiah Asher El Aboyis V'Shevna Aseife V'Yoyach ben Asaf Hamasker El Chizkiyo. They came to Chizkiyo Krui Begodim with torn garments. Why did they come with torn garments? So the continuation of the pasuk over there is they reported what Rav Shoke, he said opposite of a blessing on the Eibishter's name, so therefore they tore their garments. So about this we learned in the Braise, Echad HaShemeya, one that hears this, the Birchas Hashem. V'echad HaShemeya mipi HaShemeya, and even if you hear it from the one that heard it, so you're hearing it secondhand, that he's repeating what he heard. Chayiv L'kroya, one is obligated to tear his garments. V'ha'edim, the witnesses that come to a bezdin and testify about this, and they have to repeat what they heard, they don't have to tear their garments when they are repeating this, because they already tore their garments when they heard it the first time. The fact that they tore their garments when they heard it the first time, so what? But now if they're saying it again, they're repeating it and they're hearing it again, so they should tear their garments again. So the Gemara says, no, there's no svar to say that this is true, that the Edom would have to tear their garments again, because we see over there, the pasuk that we brought before, that they tore their garments for this. The chsiv, over there in the pasuk it says, Vayehi kishmaya hamelech Chizkiyo, when the king Chizkiyo heard about the Birchas Hashem that happened, Vayikras begadav, that the king tore his garments. So what do we see here? Hamelech kora, the king tore his garments, but v'heim loy kora, they, the ones that repeated what they heard, they did not tear their garments again. V'loy misachem minol, and the fact that when you tear your garments for hearing Birchas Hashem, so that you do not sew back up, how do you know this? Asya kriya. We compare the term kriya that it says here to the term kriya that it says before by Elisha, and there it says l'shnayim, that you leave it into two and you don't sew up the garments again. Sefer Torah shenisnat min Allah, and a Sefer Torah that's burned, from where do we know that one has to tear his garments? The Chsiv, the pasuk says, Vayehi kekra Yehudi shalosh dalses varbo, that when Yehudi read, he read this to the king, I remember which melech this was,
to one of the kings that was there and then at the time of the Beis Hamikdash, right before the Churban. So he read to him psukim from Eicha, that Yirmiyahu Hanavi said, the Nevuah on what's going to happen to the Yidden. So he read Shalosh Dalsais Varba. He read 3 or 4 psukim from Eicha. What happened? What did the king do when he heard these psukim from Eicha that speaks about the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash? Vayikara betar, and he tore it with the razor. Betar sefer. He tore it with the tar that the sefer uses. V'hishlech ala eish, he threw it into the fire. Asher ala och. So he tore it, he burnt it in the fire. The Megillah of Eicha that was read to him. Ma shalosh dalses varba. What does it mean that he read 3, 4 psukim and only after this did he go and throw into the fire? Amru leila Hayakim. Oh, so this was the king, Yehoyakim. So they said to Yehoyakim, Kosav Yirmiyah Sefer Kinnis. Do you know that Yirmiyah already wrote a book of lamentations talking about the future, what's going to happen, that the Beis Hamikdash will be destroyed? Amalahu. So he said to them, Maksiv Bey, what does it say in this book of Eicha? So they read to him the first pasuk. Eicha Yoshva Badad. How is the city of Yerushalayim sitting alone? Amar Lahu. So he responded and said, no, I'm not Malka, but I'm still going to be the king. It just speaks about the city. It doesn't speak about anything negative about me. Amalei. So then they said to him the next pasuk. Bacha Yisivka Balayla, cries by night. So again he responded and said, I'm not Malka, but I'm still the king. The third pasuk they read, Gols to Yehuda Me'ayni, the Eden are in Golas from their poverty. So again he responded and said, it doesn't say anything negative about me. I'm not Malka, I'm still the king. Dark Tzion Avel is the fourth pasuk. It says the ways of Tzion, which is Yerushalayim, are mourning. He still said, I'm not Malka, I'm still the king. Then they came to the fifth pasuk. It says, Hayut Tzarel L'Roish, that the enemies will become the head, which means they will become the king. Now, over here it said that he's going to be overthrown and the enemies will become the king. So it will affect him. Amalahu, so he said to them, Man Omra, who said this? So they said, the pasuk there says, Ki Hashem hoigal roiv shpshaya, because the Eibush is bringing this because of the sins of the Yidden. What did Yaakam HaMelech do? Miyad kodar kolas korishaba. He went and he cut out all of the names of the Eibush that are mentioned in the Sefer of Eicha, and Vesar from Beish, and he burnt it in the fire. What does it say afterwards? Over there in the pasuk it says, "V'loy pachdu, v'loy karu as bigdayim," and they were not afraid of all of this that they saw, and they did not tear their garments when they saw that he burnt the Sefer of Eicha. So now, from this we understand the klal, the Baal Mikra. So from this we understand that they should have torn their garments when they saw that he tore the Sefer Eicha and burnt it in the fire. Amalei Rav Papa Abaye. So Rav Papa said to Abaye, Eimer mishum shmuas harais. Maybe the reason why they should have torn their garments is not because of the Sefer of Eicha that was burnt, but because of the bad news that they got here. Amalei, so he answered him, Shmuas harais ba'ai shaitim yihava. Was there yet something bad that already occurred? They were told about what's going to happen in the future. Shmuas harais is only about bad news of something that already happened. Person that sees a Sefer Torah that got torn, chayev lekraya shtei kriyas. So he has to tear kriya twice. Echad ala gvil, one for the parchment of the Sefer Torah, which is also holy in itself. Echad ala ksav, and then the ones again for the ksav and the Sefer Torah that was torn. Shenemar, the pasuk says, Acharei sroif hamelech es hamegillah v'sadvarim, that the king tore the Megillah, which is the parchment. V'sadvarim is the words. Rab Abba v'Ravuna Bar Chiya have a Yosef Kamei de Rab Abba. Rab Abba and Ravuna Bar Chiya was sitting in front of Rab Abba. Bo la'afnuya. He had to go out. He had to maybe use the bathroom. So he had tefillin with him. Shakli l'tetafte. He took his tefillin. Ach seya beisadya. He placed it on a pillow on the bed there. Asya basna misa. This ostrich came along and bayel mivle. It was about to go and swallow these tefillin. Amar. So he said, if this would have happened, I would have been obligated to tear kriya twice, like we just learned, for the parchment and for the words in the tefillin. Amalei. So he said to him, Minalacha, how do you know that you would have to tear kriya twice? Right, so this is Rab Abba wanted to go out. So Rav Huna Bar Chiya said to him, how do you know this? The same thing happened once to me, that I left my tefillin and the ostrich or some animal almost came and swallowed it. And I came to Rav Masna, and he didn't know what the halach is, whether for such a thing you would have to tear kriya or not. Asayla kamed Rav Yehuda. I came to Rav Yehuda. Va'amali, and Rav Yehuda said to me, Hachi Amar Shmuel. This is what Shmuel said. Loi Amru Ela B'Zraya. This that we learned before, that a Sefer Torah that's burnt, one has to tear kriya. That's like the story by Yehoyakim HaMelech that went and grabbed the Sefer Eicha and threw it into the fire by force. And once it's in the fire, you can't save it anymore. Ukemaisa Shahaya, like the story that happened. But over here, with this story, with this ostrich, so first of all, you're able to save it from the ostrich. And second of all, the Mefarshim say, and even if the ostrich did swallow it up, you're still able to retrieve it from the body of the ostrich. It's not like burnt up when it's in the fire. So in such a situation, you don't have to tear kriya. Going back to the Braisa, it said, Ore Yehuda, when you see the cities of Yehuda and Eretz Yisrael that are destroyed, you have to tear kriya. Minolam, from where do we know this? The pasuk says, "Vayavayu anoshim mishchem," the people that came from Shechem, Mishilai, Umishaimrim, Shmaine Mish, 80 people, Mugulachi Zaken. Their beards were cut, the krui begadim, and their garments were torn, Umizgaididim, and they had scratches in their skin. Umincha levainu biyadim lahavi beis Hashem. They had karbanis to bring to the Eibishter. So we see that they tore their garments that were coming from the destroyed cities in Eretz Yisrael. Amar Abchelbai, Amar Ule Beira, Amar Abalazar. A person that sees the cities of Eretz Yisrael destroyed, he says, the holy city is becoming like a midbar. And then he tears his garments. When one sees Yerushalayim destroyed, he says, Tzion midbar haisa, Yerushalayim shmama. Tzion became like a midbar, Yerushalayim became a desolate place. And he tears his garments. When one sees the Beis Hamikdash destroyed, he says, Beis Kotshenu v'tifartenu, our holy and beautiful house, the Beis Hamikdash, Asher hilalucha v'seinu. Our forefathers have praised you. Haya l'sreit v'seish became burned. V'chol machmadenu, Haya l'charva, the place that we desired for became destroyed. And then the Kereya, he tears his garments. Last thing it said in the Braisa was Kereya al Mikdash u'maisel Yerushalayim, that one tears Kriya for seeing the Beis Hamikdash destroyed, and then he just adds to the Kriya when he sees the city of Yerushalayim destroyed. But Aminu, so the Gemara asks a contradiction on this. It says in another Braisa, Echad Hashemeya v'Echad Araya, one hears about the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, or one sees it. Kivin sheigi al Tzayfim, as soon as he comes to the mountain of Tzayfim, that he's able to see the Beis Hamikdash, Kereya, he tears his garment. The Kereya al Mikdash b'fnei Atzma, and one has to tear for the Beis Hamikdash separately, Val Yerushalayim b'fnei Atzma, and one has to tear for the Beis Hamikdash, for Yerushalayim, that is, for the city of Yerushalayim that's destroyed separately. So you see that you can't just tear one garment and then just add to the Kriya for Yerushalayim. So the Gemara answers, Loi Kashya, this is not a question. Ha, the Paga b'Mikdash bereisha. If the person sees the Beis Hamikdash before he saw Yerushalayim, so Rashi here says, let's say a person came in a box or something. I mean, today a person was in a car and it was closed up and there was no windows and he couldn't see out, and he was brought straight to the place of the Beis Hamikdash, and he didn't see the city of Yerushalayim first. So once you see the place of the Beis Hamikdash first, and only afterwards you see Yerushalayim, so then you don't have to tear separately for Yerushalayim. And the Pagab Yerushalayim Bereisha. But if one sees Yerushalayim first, and then afterwards he sees the Beis Hamikdash, then you have to tear for Yerushalayim separately, and then the Beis Hamikdash, which is a much greater pain, that one sees the Beis Hamikdash destroyed, you have to tear for that separately. Tana Rabbanan, we learned in the Braisa, V'kulan. So all of these that we just mentioned there, the lashon of the Braisa was ein misachin. Misachin means properly sewed up, properly mended. But all of them, Rashayin, L'shaylalan, you're allowed to pin it up. U'L'maylalan, L'laiktan, it's L'shaylalan is when you pin it up like with far stitches that are not near each other. And L'maylalan, L'laiktan is also 2 or 3 stitches, so it's not properly sewed up. V'lasaysan kimin sulamais, or you stitch it up also like a ladder, which has the rungs in the ladder that are far from each other, so you make a space between the stitches. But not to fully and properly mend it. Rav Chisda and Rav Chisda explain, when it says that you're not allowed to fully properly mend it, what does this mean? Be'ichoy Alexandri. The way it was done in Alexandria, Taisus over here brings that when you mend it in such a way that you don't even see b'chlal that there was ever torn. Or in Masechtas Machas it says, Kol shachu kol tzarcha, that it's fully fixed. Tan Rabbana, we learned Nabraisa Kereh Mitoicha Shalol, a person that does the Kriya in a place where it was never fully mended, it was just pinned up, it was just partially sewed up. Mitoicha Malal, Mitoicha Leket, also 2 or 3 stitches and not fully mended. Mitoicha Sulamais, or it was mended like a ladder, which is, the stitches are far from each other. Lo Yatza. One is not Yatza the Kriya because was never properly mended. Mitoicha Icho Yatza. If it was, the Kriya is done in a place where it was fully mended, then he is Yaitse. Like we said before, we're talking about Ichoy Alexandri, that it's not even noticeable that it was ever torn there. To be learned, if the Kriya was done on the top of the garment, so he's allowed to turn it upside down, and what the Kriya is going to be at the bottom, and there he could mend it completely. Rab Shimon ben Elazar says, no, even then it's not allowed to mend it. Just like the seller that was the oval, see, he himself is not allowed to mend it. Someone else that buys this garment is also not allowed to mend it. So therefore the seller has to let the buyer know that this is a garment that may not be mended. And we learned the beginning of kriya, when one tears kriya, so the amount is a tefach. That's how long it has to be. The toisefes is so in cases when when one adds to that kriya some more, like we said before, for example, by the Beis Hamikdash in Yerushalayim, so shalosh etzbos. So one has to add another 3 finger breaths for this kriya. This is Rab Meir's opinion. Rabbi Yudah said, Tchilas kriya shalosh etzbos. The first kriya is the length of 3 finger breaths. The toisefes is kolshu. And whatever you add, even a tiny bit, that's already considered to be an addition for this kriya. Amarullah, so all is said about this, halachic Rab Meir b'kriya. We paskin like Rab Meir regarding the initial kriya that it has to be a tefach. Halachic Rab Yudah b'taisvis, and we paskin like Rab Yudah regarding adding that it could be even a kolshu. Tani Nami Achi, we learned this in the Braisa, Rabbi Yesi's opinion, Rabbi Yesi Yomer, Tchilas kriya tefach, the beginning the kriya has to be the amount of a tefach, v'toisefes kolshu. And if you're adding, even with a kolshu, that's an addition. Tan Rabbana, we learned in the Braisa, Omru Loi, if a set up person, Meis Aviv, his father passed away, Vikara, and he taught kriya for that. Meis Benoi, his son passed away, Vahaisif, and he added an addition to this kriya for the son. So Tachtoin Misache, that part that he added below for the son, is allowed to be mended. Elyoin Eine Misache, the kriya at the top, which was for his father, may not be mended. Meis Benoi Vikara, if they told him that his son passed away and he taught kriya for that, and then they told him Meis Aviv, that his father passed away, Vahaisif, and he added to the kriya, so then it's the reverse. Elyoin Misache, what was in the beginning, which was for the son, that is allowed to be mended. Tachtoin Eine Misache, what's below may not be mended. Meis Aviv, Meis Imai, Meis Achiv, Meis Achaisai, if he was told that his father passed away, the mother, the brother, the sister, then Kriya Kera Echad Lekulam. He could tear kriya once for all of these that passed away. Rabbi Yudah ben Beseira argues and says, Al Kulan Kera Echad. For each one of them, he could tear 1 kriya, but Al Aviv Al Imai Kera Echad. But for a father and a mother, that one has to tear kriya separately, because all the other relatives could be together, but for a father and a mother, it deserves a different honor, a different kriya. One can't add to the kriya that was done for a father and a mother. So when one tears kriya for the father and mother, you can't then add to it. So that has to be separate. My time, what's the reason for this? Because for the father and a mother, that's a separate thing that deserves a kriya for itself, and one can't add to it. It's not the right thing to add a kriya for something else, for another relative to that. Shmuel says, Halachik, Rabbi Yudah ben Beseira. That over here we're machmer, and we paskin like Rabbi Yudah ben Beseira, that one has to tear kriya separately for a father and a mother. Asks the Gemara, Shmuel hachi. Did Shmuel say that we're machmer here like Rabbi Yudah ben Beseira? For Shmuel, we know that Shmuel said, Halachik kedivri amekel ba'avel. We always paskin like the lenient opinion regarding avelus. So the Gemara answers, avelus l'chod and kriya l'chod. The concept of mourning is a separate thing, and there we always go like the lenient opinion, but kriya is not part of the avelus itself as a separate source, as we had in Amar Aleph, all the sources of the psukim, and for that, we could follow the stringent opinion. At heichen kareya, until how far does a person have to tear down his garment? So the first opinion is atiburai, until all the way down to the navel. Yesh aimrim ad libay. Others say until the heart, to uncover the heart. Ava pishayin ra'il davar. There's no source for this, clear proof, but zeichel davar. But there's a hint for this. Shenem, the pasuk says, "V'kiru levavchem va'al bigdeichem." Tear your hearts and not your garments. So we see that the kriya is connected to the heart. Higia letiburai. A person that tore once, twice, because he had to add to the kriya more and more because other few relatives passed away, and he tore kriya all the way down to his stomach. Marchik shalosh etzboi. So if one has to tear kriya again, so he moves in the garment 3 finger breadths away, and there he could tear kriya again. Nismalim elofanov, if the garment is already totally torn from the front, machzir la'chayrav, so you can exchange the garment, what's in the back, to the front, and then he can tear kriya there again. Nismalim el-maila, if he tore kriya so many times on the top of this garment, hoivchem el-mata, so you can turn it upside down and tear kriya at the bottom of the garment. But vaykerem el-matum and atzdadin lo yotza. If one leaves the kriya of the garment at the bottom and at the side and tears it there, one is not yotza with the kriya. Ella shekohen gadol payram ulmata. A kohen gadol is the only one that tears kriya not at the top of his garment but at the bottom of his garment. Pligi Rav Masne Umar Ukve. Rav Masne and Mar Ukve argued about the subject that we brought up before regarding being meisif, adding to a kriya that was already torn before. And they were both saying the name of the father of Shmuel and Levi. Chad Omar, one of them said, Kol Shive that during the shiva one can tear, he has to tear again if a relative passes away and then he's still in shiva, so he's going to have to tear again a different garment or in a different place. La'acha shiva, after the shiva, so then meisif, he is not going to have to tear another garment. He can just add to the kriya that was there before. The Gemara is going to explain in a second why this is. Chad Omar, another opinion was, Kol Shloishim, as long as one is still in the Shloishim, Keireya, then if there's another relative that passed away, he's going to have to tear a separate garment. La'acha Shloishim, but after the Shloishim, Meisiv, then he can just add to the original Kriya that there was. So now the Gemara is going to explain this, but by asking a question here. Maskefla Rab Zayda asked the question, Man do Amma Kol Shiva Keireya. The one that says that during the shiva, so he has to tear a separate garment. Amai, what's the reason for this? Because during the shiva, one is not allowed to pin up that kriya that he did. So therefore, if he's going to continue tearing that initial kriya that he did during the shiva, it's not noticeable that he's tearing more here because it's already torn and he's not allowed to pin it up. After the shiva, since he's allowed to pin it up, so you can tear that very same kriya again because it was already pinned up, so it's noticeable. So that's the reason of his opinion. So the question now was, this that the master said, we learned this before, a woman is allowed to pin up her garment that you tore kriya immediately after the kriya in the shiva. So hachanami, are you going to say that regarding a woman, the halacha is different, that she, even during the shiva, does not have to tear a separate garment for kriya, she could tear the same kriya again for another relative? If the reason for everybody else why only after shiva they can tear the same kriya is because they pin it up after the shiva, so for a woman that should apply even in the shiva because she could pin it up right away. So the Gemara answers, Nahasa mishum kvay dishahu. The only reason they allowed her to pin up her garment is because it's not honorable, it's not sneezdik for a woman to have her garment torn. But as Rashi here says, it's not me'ikar adin. Me'ikar adin really, the kriya during the shiva for a woman is the same as a man. And therefore we treat it with the same halacha, that if she has to tear an additional kriya, it has to be in a separate garment. Now the Gemara asks a similar question on the other opinion. Man da'ama kol shloishim kereya, the opinion that said that during the shloishim one has to tear separately. Amai, what was the reason for his opinion? Because you're not allowed to fully mend it during the shiva, during the shloishim, that is. Even if you can pin it up, but one is not allowed to fully mend it during the shloishim. And therefore, if one has to tear again, he's going to have to tear a separate garment. But after the shloishim, you can fully mend it, so therefore you can tear that again. Elos, if so, a garment that one tore for a father and a mother, which as we learned before, is never allowed to be mended forever. Hachanami. So are we going to say that even after the shloishim, that you can't tear that garment again because it's never allowed to be mended? And says the Gemara, no, Hasam Mishum Kaved Aviv Imahu. Over there, really, the halacha of every kriya is that it's allowed to be mended after the shleishim. But there's a separate Indian, a special halacha for a father and a mother, for the honor of the father and the mother, that you leave it as is, not mended. But me'ikra adin, as Rashi says, mitzad the halacha of kriya, it really could be mended. So therefore, we treat it with the same halacha, like every kriya, that after shleishim, you can do the kriya in that place again. Person that goes out with a garment that was already torn for a person that passed away. He didn't tear it for this mace. He just goes out and he makes it look like as if he tore the garment for this mace. So he's stealing the mesim and the chayim. He's making believe as if he tore it, so that he's stealing from the mesim, not giving the proper honor for the mace, the tear kriya, and from the chayim, for the living, for the avelim there as well. Shimon Gamliel said, a person that says to his friend, Hashileni chalukech, borrow me or lend me your garment, and I'm going now to visit my father that's sick. So the person that you're borrowing from realizes that you're going to go visit a sick father. And the person went, and he found that his father passed away. So now you're wearing a borrowed garment. So you're allowed to tear it, and you'll sew it back up. When you come back to the house, you have to return the garment you borrowed, and you give him the money for this that you tore. So whatever, if it's now going to be worth less, so you have to pay him for that. But you're allowed to tear it because you let him know what you're going to be using his garment for, that you're going to visit a sick father. But if you did not let him know, so then you can't do the kriya with this garment, you can't touch it. And we learned in the Braisa, a sick person himself is very sick, and a relative of his passed away. So we don't let him know that someone passed away. Died to Yolov, because it may completely affect him emotionally. You don't want to do this to him. And you should not do kriya in front of him as well. And the women that may be talking about what happened, that his relative passed away, we quiet them down in front of him. Another halacha here, that regarding a child, so you do kriya for him, but it's not that he's obligated in any avelos or kriya, but it's only mipnei agmas nefesh. This is to bring by the adults that they should express their sorrow by seeing this child that kriya was done for him. The kaid and another halacha here, the kaid and al-chama v'al-chamaisa, a person tears kriya for father-in-law or mother-in-law mipnei kavod ishtoi, because of the honor of his wife. Rav Papa said, Tana be'evod Abbasi, we learned in Evod Abbasi, which is also called Mesechtes Machis, that Aval lo yaniach tinek b'tei chekai, he should not hold the child on his lap. It brings him to play around with this child. And the people, he'll become disgraced in front of people. They're saying, look, this person in Avelis is playing around. Okay, let's learn one more piece over here. It said before in the Mishnah, ve'ein mavrin al mitay zekufais, when you come to have the meal together with the Avelim, so the people that are coming to console, so they don't sit on the beds that are upright. So the Gemara explains that it depends. It brings a brayser that it depends who the menachmim are. So Tanir Rabbanan ahiluch lebeis avel, a person that goes to the house of an avel. Im haya libay gazbay, if you're very friendly with the avel, then yavru al mitis kfuyais. Then one sits on the bed that's turned over, just like the avel himself that sits on a turned over bed. So too the person coming to be menachem avel also sits in the same like the avel himself. Then lav, but if one is not very friendly with the avel, yavru al mitis kfuyais. Then he sits in a bed that's upright. Gemara brings the incident that happened. Rava Isra be Milsa. Rava was an avel. All gabe Abba Bar Marta, to who Abba Bar Minyaimi, Abba Bar Marta, which had another name, Abba Bar Minyaimi, came to be Menachem Avolim. So Rava Zakif, and so Rava put the bed upright for him to sit down. Abba Bar Marta coffee. Abba Bar Marta went and turned the bed over down and to sit like that, like the same like an oval, to be Menachem Avol Rava. So Rava said, Kama lesbe daita lahai tzor b'mirabbanan. This Talmud Chacham, Abba Bar Marta, that came to be Menachem Avimi, doesn't understand what's going on here. That he's not so close to me, and the only time one sits on the same level as an oval if there's a very big closeness between them. But since he's not close to me, so therefore I picked up the bed for him.